Hello, magical experimenters. Here I am, Taylor Ellwood, and tonight we're talking about the aesthetics of magic and why it can be a potent tool. I didn't always think of the aesthetics of magic as being important to magic, and it didn't really strike me as being important until I ended up having a conversation with unfortunately a former friend of mine now. But it was an interesting conversation at the time, and he really made me think about the fact that the aesthetics of magic are actually very useful things to apply to magic. And since that time, I've actually really given it a lot of thought and been exploring it in my own way. In fact, I would say that in some ways my approach to the aesthetics of magic has been informed in part by the functionality of the aesthetics. What prompted me to create this video is that I've seen lately there's been a couple of videos where people are critiquing, this whole concept of aesthetics and glamour and magic as a lifestyle. And I think they have some points. In all fairness, I do think they do. And I'm going to talk a bit about where they're coming from and why I agree with them to some extent. But I'm also going to talk about why I do think the aesthetics of magic is an important and potent tool of magic that we can use. So let's go in on the negative first. Like, what are the issues with the aesthetics of magic? You know what? I totally get it. The fact of the matter is there are people who've kind of created what I would call a lifestyle approach to magic, right? They wear all the bling. They've got all the fancy schmancy clothes and everything else, and they're all like super intense and everything else, and they're trying to show how magic is this way, and you basically wonder, have they even ever spent a day out there in the real world working at a job? Because quite frankly, you're kind of like, damn, how did they manage that? Because they're basically they're just basically living this lifestyle as a magic. And I mean, I'll tell you, there is some questionable content I find. Like, in some cases I'm kind of like, does this person even really practice magic, or are they just throwing on the pentagrams and other stuff and rocking it because it's a lifestyle thing that they're trying to use as a way to get people interested and buy their stuff, or do whatever else. There's a certain commercialism at work in some ways, which is kind of funny when you think about it, but there it is. But then again, when isn't there commercialism at work and in life? I mean, to some degree or another. I don't think that's really all that shocking, to be frank. I just think people need to be honest and transparent about it. And sometimes I think that where I have issues with where people are using the aesthetic of magic is that sometimes it seems more like it's about the image than the actual substance of magic. So I think that when it becomes more about the image, then I really question, are they even practicing magic, or are they just telling themselves that, well, hey, if I appear this way, I can get a bunch of naive people to grab on and get caught up in what I'm trying to sell and everything else, and I can create this lifestyle off of them. And that's kind of like someone being a social media influencer. Like, I really question the value of that. Like what's the point? Like, okay, great, you're an influencer, but how are you actually meaningfully contributing to other people's lives? What are you doing to help people out? How are you showing up for those people? So in that sense, I totally get it. But, and this is where we're going to spend the majority of the video, I also think there is value in the aesthetics of magic, and I think it can be a potent tool of magic when it's combined with actual substance, when people are actually doing magic, when they're not just rocking a pentagram for the sake of rocking it, but because they actually genuinely believe and they're actually doing magical work. Now, I don't have a pentagram, actually. I don't wear one. I don't have one tattooed on my body or anything like that, and I likely never will. I mean, they're cool, but they're not the most important thing in my life. But as someone who does a fair amount of art that's magical art, someone who obviously writes books on magic, and someone who practices magic every single day, I mean, I'll tell you, I don't get caught up in the aesthetics of magic in terms of my overall appearance, okay? I mean, sometimes you see me do these videos in t-shirts and jeans, and other times you see me dressed like this because this is what happens to be comfortable. I don't care like if you get fixated on my appearance, because that's not what it's about for me. But when I think about the aesthetics of magic, I do think about like what is it that I'm putting into the overall design of magic. Like if you were to look at my magical room, you would see paintings all over the place. You'd see them on the ceilings, you would see them on the walls of the room. You'd even see some close by to the baseboard. You'd see candles, you would see altars, you would see some other magical tools, some traditional, some not. And these are all things that I use in my magical work. And you'd also see a ton of books. Um, but you know, that's basically when I think of the aesthetics of magic, I think of it in terms of how I am crafting and creating a very specific space. And part of that space is about the design of the space and how that design influences and reinforces the magical work that I'm doing. My approach to the aesthetics of magic then is really an approach that is simultaneously about the appearance but also about the practical functionality of the aesthetics and how it reinforces the magical work. You know, I'm never going to be someone who's just going to put something up because it looks cool. I'm going to ask myself how putting it up can actually help me connect with the spirits that I'm working with, how I can apply it to magic, how it's going to be meaningful to me and the way that I practice magic. And I think that that's really key. And I think that what happens a lot of times is that when people forget that aspect of magic, that's when they get caught up in the image of magic as opposed to the reality. Now, the other thing I will talk about is glamour magic, and that is an aspect of magic that is based more on appearance. Now, I've done glamour magic before. I've done it when I've done talks in order to stand out more and to grab the attention of people listening to me. And I've done it for job interviews, you know, to stand out at the interview and make sure I make an impression on them, a positive impression, I might add. And I've also sometimes done glamour magic in the opposite direction. I've done glamour magic where I'm basically trying to not appear before people, or I'm making sure that they don't notice me as much. And one of the things that I kind of find funny in regards to the whole glamour magic thing is that for the most part, you see people talking about glamour magic in relationship to, you know, standing out and everything else. And that's cool. Don't get me wrong. Totally cool. I think it's awesome. Go for it. But why not also explore how to apply glamour magic in the opposite direction? How not to stand out, how to make yourself disappear, how to make people lose interest if you need to. I've done that a number of times over the years. I've used it sometimes when I'm dealing with people who end up stalking me, for example. Not that they're stalking me because I'm hot looking or anything like that, but because, you know, I'm an author or whatever else, and they think that they need to get a hold of me for whatever reason. I mean, I'm always happy to talk to my fans, don't get me wrong, but I also believe in firm boundaries. And sometimes when it gets a little weird, that's where I'm like, okay, I got to put my foot down. And some of that involves some magical work. Um, you know, so I mean, glamour magic can go in both directions. It can make you stand out, but it can also be used to make you disappear. And that's one of those things that I think is very useful to explore in terms of glamour magic. The other thing that I think is really useful for magic in general, like with the aesthetic aspect, is that, you know, if you are going for a specific look or appearance or way of doing things, again, bring that functionality into play. Like, how is this helping you? One person I know, and this is a person, she occasionally creates these little live stories. And one of the things that I find cool is that she has these highlights that she'll, like these AR highlights, like all, you know, but by AR, I mean augmented reality highlights that she'll put on. So like, you know, like the phones now, you can like make yourself look like a dog or a cat or whatever else. Well, she's like put stars on, you know, her in her little videos. And I'm like, that's pretty freaking cool. Like that's something that you could play with. And I could actually see that as a form of pop culture magic where you're applying augmented reality as part of the glamour of your magic in order to grab people's attention, in order to filter or drive people's attention in a specific way if you want them to go in that direction. And I could also see even using augmented reality in circumstances where, in terms of the aesthetic design of your place, like if you are doing like a magic ritual in a specific space that you've created, why not create some augmented reality sigils that you impose on, different things and that people can see using their cell phones or whatever else. Again, that can be an interesting practical aspect to that aesthetics that allows you to use the aesthetics to grab people's attention or do whatever else, but also serves that purpose of functionally allowing you to work magic. And again, that's where we want the aesthetics of our magic to be. We want it to be a potent tool that allows us to transform our magical reality and our regular reality, our mundane reality as well. So when I look at the aesthetics, I do see it as both as a thing about appearance, sure, an image and all that, but I always ask myself the functionality of the image and aesthetics. And I would just say to any of you out there that, if you're really caught up in the aesthetics, nothing wrong with that, but balance it out and ask yourselves what the practical aspect of the aesthetics is. How is it actually helping you to do practical magic? Because that makes a difference. And I mean, that's really what magic is about. Sure, we can do the whole magic as a lifestyle thing and look a certain way, but if we're not practicing magic, then it doesn't really mean a thing. It just means you're a faker. And we don't need fakers. We need people who are actually doing real magic. And that's really how I look at the aesthetics of magic, is that it's not about appearing a certain way. It's about using the appearance as a functional tool to help you achieve consistent results. All right, that's it for this video this week. If you're watching this on YouTube and you liked it, feel free to subscribe and then click the little bell beside the subscribe button so that you get notifications when I do videos. Take care and see you next week.